All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and we are live. Welcome to the year-end 2017 Rogue Money Radio, and I'm very excited today. This is CJ. Very excited today to be joined by Wolf, Ken, Bankster Slayer. V right now is in being attacked by these birds that are in his vent, so he's hopefully going to make it on, but he's pretty occupied. Right now, we're going to make it sound pretty dramatic, but it's just birds. It's not anything else. But anyway, and then hopefully W will be joining us. And so Wolf, Ken, Bankster, Radio.
Yo, yo, yo. Good to be here.
Hello, everybody.
Take off, CJ.
Excellent. Very good. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining, and I wish you guys, I'm glad that, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I thought it was just very important to get us in because 2017 was a monumental shift year. And as we head into 2018, I thought it would be great to get the talent of Rogue Money together to talk about 2017, the future, the direction that we're going. And let's face it, it's been a lot of things happening. So let's start out with Bankster. So let's talk about 2017, perhaps about things that occurred. People, anything you want to, Bankster. So I yield the floor to you, Bankster.
Yeah, I was thinking, if I had to summarize the year, could I do it in 5 words or less? So I was thinking, what are the top 5 things that I think shaped the whole year? Word or concept is the swamp. I mean, President Trump dominated this year. We started the year with the inauguration and the swamp. Next thing, in late summer, we had Weinstein, the whole sexual allegation story that has been sweeping and hasn't even gotten started yet. Next, my favorite, Sophia the robot. Artificial intelligence is going to play a big role in the months to come. My 4th one was Las Vegas, the Las Vegas shooting incident. Not least, blockchain and cryptocurrency is something that will be dominating all next year and the years to come, no doubt.
Very cool, very cool. Wolf.
I don't know about 5 people, but I'm gonna actually talk about the people I call the wizards, which are my buddies, and that's people like Ken, V, Jim Willie, London Paul. Many of these people, in fact, I'll include myself, not as a wizard, but had made a statement regarding something that would prove finality to the dollar getting ready to be displaced and pushed aside. Renminbi or yuan trade for oil in Saudi Arabia. As far as I'm concerned, that was huge. It is not received near the publicity it should have, at least in the West, but I compare it to something I've wrote about before, and it's kind of like when a corporation decides they're going to liquidate, and it's because the two corporate heads, the VP and the president, get in a fist fight. Well, the lawyers get the papers done 6 months to a year later, but when did the corporation actually end? It was when they got in a fist fight. Well, in this case, we're not talking about the end of a corporation. We're talking about the end of the dollar. We're at the stage where I left a part out where the guys in my other example, the fist fight and the lawyers coming in actually happened. In between that, like 2 months later, the 2 guys that got in a fist fight that won't talk are drug into the room together, and some other guys in suits come in and a buyout starts. We're witnessing that, and that's what's going on. And China, it's not necessarily a buyout, but they're getting ready to push the dollar aside. This is an official push of the dollar aside. And if you can't see it, all these people I consider to be very bright about economics and geopolitics have spoken about this coming up. I know Ken has, I know Jim Willie had years ago. It's here. And that's what I saw this past year that I thought was humongous. And it involves a lot of smart people that predicted it, and now their prediction is here. So
right.
The guys
Right, yeah.
entered the room, that the lawyers haven't drawn it. All we're hearing now is, well, they haven't done anything official yet, and it's not officially trading. It's official. It's done. There's just a little bit of balking because Western powers are causing pain at the doorstep of the Saudis and some of the royals. But the bottom line is that you can't stop this. The momentum is there, and it's moving, and this is a big deal. That was it for me.
Great insights, Wolf. Great insights. Ken.
Well, the whole 2017 goes back to what something I've been pushing since 2016. It's a global frequency shift. It's similar to what 100 years ago. The only thing we haven't had is the culmination of global war. Perhaps the big difference is that we have had numerous different proxy wars, but they've all centered in the same areas. The old Ottoman Empire, the Serbia, the different areas that wanted independence, and the populist movement uprisings. We saw. Think about all the political changes we saw this year. Austria, we have a 31-year-old over. We have Merkel, whose political party after 4 terms is now standing on the cusp of annihilation, to what a neo-Nazi party that hadn't been in the Reichstag since 1945. We have Italy that's continuing. They still have not found a replacement for Matteo Renzi. We have France, where they try to bring in this Chamberlain type individual, a Rothschild puppet, and he really hasn't accomplished much. We've got the EU, which is trying to solidify itself as a sole continental government that's going to have sovereign control over finances, economy, politics, and even have its own army. It's a start. Now, going back to what Wolf was saying about the yuan-denominated oil contract, well, that's just the start, because just recently, a couple days ago, and you can check some of these articles over at the Daily Economist that I focused on, Russia is in the process of bringing about a joint cryptocurrency for use within the BRICS and the EU, Eurasian Economic Union. So, a combination of not only a replacement for the petrodollar oil system, but there's also going to be a cryptocurrency that's going to allow the East and everything along the Silk Road to not necessarily kill the dollar, but to isolate it. As Jim Willey's been saying in his when he was on recently, there's going to be the dollar system that's going to be in the West. There's going to be a cryptocurrency-backed resource system that's in the East, and they're going to separate themselves, and it's going to allow Europe especially to decide who wants to join the East or who wants to remain in the West. That, I think, is going to be the big division and separation that we're going to see in 2018. Also, this oil contract in China is occurring exactly when the expectations of commodity prices are going to rise going forward. Oil is now up to $66 a barrel. When was the last time we saw it really over 50? It's been 3 or 4 years that it's remained stagnant in that 50. So with the new oil contract, that's going to attract Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, all of those who are going to want to deal in a higher oil price rather than a manipulated paper one. It's also going to see a global oil rush, which, in a sense, even though you're going to have higher commodity prices in oil, you're going to have a remaining glut of oil, of supply, because Trump is now going to sign a executive order to allow for Deepwater Horizon, the Gulf, to be drilled again, which hasn't really happened since the BP oil spill. So we're going to see another energy push, and it's not going to be an embargo based. It's going to be a massive push towards increasing supply, and if prices are going up, we had in 2008, 2009, 2010, we had the Great Recession. And yet we had commodity prices at all-time highs and oil at $150 a barrel. Go figure that. Because the financialization of markets have completely disconnected from the supply and demand of the general economy. And with so much money out there, the global debt, you are going to see all these commodity prices shoot through the moon in sort of a high inflation, not quite a hyperinflation. But the fact is that nobody's really needing higher supply. I think we're going to have some type of economic movements, though you can't trust this 4 to 6% that they're projecting because of tax reform. One, because we don't produce anything. If anything, they're going to have a higher increase in consumer spending and call it GDP. So everything is still sitting on that taper. And there's one big thing as we head into 2018 that I think is going to be the catalyst that could bring down Europe. But we can get to that when we get to forecasts and predictions for 2018. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Ken, for that. And I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of things that are were on my radar as far as 2017 and the outlook. Bankster, so much going on right now. The QAnon, the potential of, there's so much heading in to 2018 and a true awakening that's occurring. And the only thing that I would contribute as well as far as 2017 is just the fact to me, I think we witnessed a mass awakening of the people to the reality that they can't trust the MSM. I think the Vegas was a monumental moment where people were not buying that narrative. They're like, wait a minute, none of this is making sense. And you alluded to that about 2018. So what are your thoughts on everything from the political landscape to the economy? What's on your radar for 2018?
Artificial intelligence is going to dominate everything in our reality, and it is creating the reality around us. We talk a lot about the Matrix, and I still say the movie The Matrix was one of the most singular, most important movies that was ever created. It gave us a clue about the structure that we live in, but it's always been created that way ever since money was invented at the state level 2,000 years ago. There's been sort of a matrix that we are all allowed to operate in. I was thinking about how I live out here in the Southwest, and you still see, cattle ranches that extend for miles, acres, hundreds of acres. And when in the center of the property, they're not aware of the fence that is around the property because you can't even see the fence. It's so far away. They think that they are living and operating in some sort of freedom. But really, there is a fence that they only see it when they happen to wander off closer to the fence. And we're kind of getting a sense of that. And I wouldn't say that most people are, but some people are starting to figure out that there is a fence around us. And I have to give credit to Lionel of Lionel Media. He talks about this every day, and he has really jumped on the whole QAnon phenomenon, death of mainstream media, because his whole career has been spent in mainstream media. And he's how, have you noticed we've gotten to the point where anything in the mainstream media is so stale. Anything you listen to is already out of date. And we have now entered this digital age where we go directly to the internet to get our news. And now we have this around QAnon, who may or may not be a real person, or may be a combination of a human agent and an AI agent working together. Well, we now go straight to this person who is aggregating news and knowledge and data at the speed of light. And we can get what we need to know. We can ask a question, or that person will feed us. That, if you've been noticing, so much of what's been printed by QAnon is that comes true within a few hours or a few days. It really is news happening at the speed of light, which tells us that there is something digital all behind it. And we're going to keep seeing that all next year. I mentioned Sophia the robot. This was a very public way of introducing artificial intelligence. And you guys mentioned this on a morning show, I think it was yesterday, about the token sale that Hanson Robotics and the Singularity Net offered earlier this month, where I've been following their Twitter threads at the Singularity Net website. What was their whole goal was to digitize or to monetize artificial intelligence. So they offered this token, the artificial AGI token, I think that was called. And their point is to take what they've created and create commercial uses out of it. And you're going to take the space of 1 minute, all those tokens were sold out. And I've heard you had to have a minimum of $250,000 to even participate in the auction. So the technology that they're creating is being offered again to the money masters of the world. We have seen how very softly AI has been introduced to us. The little Google Home Assistant devices and the Echo Dots. If you noticed during Black Friday, Amazon had a huge sale where I think they dropped the price of the Echo Dot down to $29. So, I mean, there was a huge, they sold so many on that one day, and that little device is now being inserted. You're going to find that it's just as normal to have a device like that in your home as it is to have a stereo or even a car. In fact, I will say that a Sophia robot will become the next thing that every household will just want to have, like having a car in the garage. And so this is all moving us into this new digital era that is erasing national boundaries. And this is, again, part of this whole New World Order movement to erase the idea that there is even such a thing as national boundaries, and that we are all just one global community.
Great insights. Very well said. Wolf, in terms of the petro yuan, the massive shift that we witnessed this year away from the U.S. dollar, and I think you nailed it when you stated that it's already a done deal. There's no going back. What else do you see in 2018? Concerns? What keeps you awake at night? What are your forecasts?
For 2018, for me, clearly, it's still the dollar. It's going to disrupt lives in the Western world, as you're going to have disruptions and dislocations to the system that people tend to take for granted, in particular in the United States. I just don't see how that's not possible that it will happen. You may say, well, it's just inflation going up and they suffer import inflation. But that's the disruptions they're not ready for. And the reason they're not ready for these disruptions is because they're heavily laden with debt. And their balance sheets, personally, are far adrift from where they would have been the way our ancestors did things. There's just no way the dollar is going to not go away as the big story for years to come. It's the biggest event I think we'll see in geopolitical history. And the other one, and it's going to be significant next year. I'm convinced of it. The other one is, so get into hard assets, get away from paper assets, quit worshiping them, and quit believing, like a headline on Zero Hedge had yesterday, doesn't surprise me. American confidence soars, especially among Republicans. They're asleep. They think everything's rosy. They think USA's, they're going to have to wake up. There's going to be dollar problems. The system is not intact. The other one is, I think Bitcoin's going to be like AOL. Back in the 90s, AOL was it. There wasn't going to be any other internet big player. They're it. Nobody else would surpass them. I think somebody's going to, and we're going to see something big happen in the crypto space, possibly in a significant manner with regard to hard asset backing. And I think that will come to pass next year too. Those two items, the dollar is still the story. It's the world's reserve currency. It's not going to be supplanted by a light switch moment. It takes time. We're witnessing that. And the Russian analyst sent me an email about a month ago, said, "You're going to write again." And I got to thinking, I told him, I don't know. I don't see the point. Trump saved the U.S. There's no point in writing. Everything's good. Unemployment's great. He's taking credit for the economy now, same numbers that Obama had. The problem is the system is not intact, and we're worshiping a system that is in decline and going away. But our media is not portraying it that way, and we're going to find out the hard way when it slaps you upside the unsuspecting face. And I think next year it's going to happen. But why listen to me? I keep saying that year after year. And I think it does next year. I don't see how it couldn't, especially after the Petro yuan. So I'm stuck in one lane. I'm stuck in one lane, CJ, going with the same thing. And I kind of picture Bitcoin like AOL was to the internet, and how all of a sudden all these other guys came out, and it wasn't just, and of course there's a ton of crypto players. I'm just saying there's going to be something bigger even. And I don't know what that is, but I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, the same unemployment numbers, the same stat that candidate Trump was saying was fictitious, were made up, was, you know, inflated, that there are so many bubbles out there. And now we witness that he's taking credit for those same numbers.
Yeah, and the interesting thing to me, CJ, is London Paul apparently has contacts within, based on comments he makes, I'm pretty confident he has some pretty substantial contacts that know what's going on within the Trump team. And I sent him back one time an email. I said, does this guy not get it? He keeps saying these things, but they don't jive with the reality. Does he not get it? He always would send back, he knows. He understands what's going on. I'm doubting that now. I mean, you know, at some point, and I've ticked off a lot of my family members and other people. And by the way, I voted for Trump, but I've said this guy lacks the courage or the shoulders broad enough to tell the truth about something that isn't favorable, that isn't likable. Wolf Gray can scream and holler all day long that you better prepare and do something about it. Irrelevant. Wolf Gray doesn't have the voice. This guy does. And if the Americans can't take it and it hurts their feelings, then they ain't real Americans. I don't care. He's got to get the message out, but now it's probably too late. You can't go around saying stock market's at all-time highs. He made a quote one time that I was just baffled. I couldn't see how anybody that had any business acumen could have made the quote. He said something that the stock market just hit a new record all-time high. And what really got my attention is he said something to the effect, it picked up X number of trillion. I think it was $3.3 trillion in the stock market net worth. Net worth? Really? The stock market picked up the U.S. economy by 3.3 trillion in net worth? You want to start subtracting the debt out and the margin and whatever else has got that? And can you count on it as being real net worth? I couldn't even believe he said it and equated it. They don't equate. And somehow or another people are seeing that. And I don't know why he's doing it. I had one guy tell me, which was kind of funny. He said, Wolf, are you getting anywhere telling people that stuff? I said, no, not really. He said, maybe Trump's a fan of the Wolf Grays and he's watching you and he's saying, hey, that guy's no good at it. I'm just going to let it blow up and then I'll help with a rebuild. What's the point in painting things negative? But you can't say last year that, and I remember it in a debate, he said to Hillary, the stock market is one big, fat, ugly bubble. And this year he's not saying any of that. And if you doubt that, go into the archives of Rogue Money into mid-September and pull the article called Spread the Word, the Perfect Stagflation Hurricane Has Landed, because it can and because it was predestined to. Scroll down to the Stagflation Hurricane Has Landed subtitle and hit the first hyperlink, and it has an interview with Peter Schiff and Joe Rogan with clips of Mr. T making these statements. I haven't a clue what his thought train is, And I don't like saying that. I don't think he has any courage because he's jumping all over people that are in high position and kicking them in the crotch. So why didn't he have the courage to jump on this one? I don't get it. I'm at a loss on that one, and it's kind of discouraged me pretty substantially. Anyway, go ahead.
No, completely. Yeah, well said. Ken, 2018. What's on your radar? What is your outlook?
Yeah, first I want to address something that Wolf said. You know, if you look at things from the surface, and I know we make the big jokes about 4D chess and 5D chess and 10D chess. The fact of the matter is I've read The Art of the Deal. And in many ways,
ditto, by the way, ditto.
I was going to say, in deal, is a 20th century version of Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in many ways, the one thing that stands out the most, and this is why during the elections to call crooked Hillary and little Rubio and weak Jeb, et cetera, is because in one of the chapters it says the only way Congress will ever do something that you need them to do is by putting them in the media, making them feel the hard questions to start feeling jittery and nervous that the media and the people are looking at what they're doing. One of the things that I found out from somebody who got, like you said, got some information from the insiders, when he comes up and says something outrageous in the morning, guess what? If you go out to the mainstream media, they spend the first 5 hours of the day simply talking about what his stupid tweet was. In the meantime, while the media is focusing on the tweets, he's getting things done that the media is not even bothering to cover. Is it more important that the media is covering it and that the American people know it, or is it important that he's accomplishing it? We see a lot of the things with the Mueller. Okay, if Trump comes out like in his tweet and says, hey, we think Mueller's doing a good job, and we're not going to, there's no Russian hoax, but Mueller's going to prove that it isn't. Well, from our standpoint, Mueller is one of the most corrupt swamp dwellers there is. But when Jay Sekulow comes out on Fox and says, we are completely happy with Mueller, he is doing a good job, then I take thing, because I have a ton of respect for Jay Sekulow. Jay Sekulow is not a swamp dweller. And if he's coming out, part of his lawyer team, they know something. Whether it's something that early on Trump came up to Mueller and said, you know what, we've got all the goods on you, especially for Uranium One. You have a choice. You're going to either work for us to start draining the swamp in the position as the head of the investigation, or we're going to go after you. And Mueller can say what he wants, but he's an egoist. His reputation is the most important thing to him. And secondly, he's also a survivalist. He's been through the Clinton years, the Obama years, the whatever, and he's done the work of the establishment. So he's gonna try to protect his own ass. So with that being said, when you see a lot of this stuff, taking things for the stock market, well, let's take a look at the stock market. Forgotten among this cryptocurrency mania of 2017 is the fact that global stocks have achieved records that we've never seen in the history of the stock markets. You know that we've had positive gains in global stock markets, Europe, Japan, China, United States, 13 straight months. That has never happened across the board. We've had, out of the 37 different bourses out there, all but 9 are at all-time highs. We've gone 5,000 points this year. But you know what else has fallen under the radar? Did you know that the gold price, gains in gold, despite the fact that we nearly hit 1,400 last year, we're going to have the highest gains in gold this year than since 2010? Think about that. That tells you how much the gold price was slammed between the November elections and December 31st last year. But gold is going up. One of my predictions for 2018, commodity prices, Dr. Copper, oil, gold, everything's going to start seeing high inflation. It's going to be a return to the high inflation that we saw in 2010, which led to the Arab Spring. Okay, we're going to have global stagflation, but commodity prices are going to be through the roof. All that printed money, from all the central banks are going to come home to roost. The second thing is, and this is something that's definitely falling under the radar, thanks to the Tax Reform Act. All this money that is projected, that's going to, the different corporations are going to be right now. Anybody have a guess? It's in Europe.
They can. Good.
Yeah, it's in Europe. And what's going to happen when several $1 trillion comes back from European banks? They are going to implode from a liquidity crisis, because that money that's stored as a reserves are the only thing that's keeping the leverage going for these European banks. So my forecast is that as money comes back, Europe is going to have another 2010 liquidity crisis, and they're not going to be able to deal with it.
I will add something to that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to, what you were talking about, Ken, made me think of that the whole world is being set up for the biggest problem reaction solution event that the world has ever seen in the monetary arena.
Yep.
Think about what's been happening since 2013. You don't think that Russia and China and the BRICS have been preparing for this? They've created SIPs, the new Shanghai Gold Exchange, the connections between the Russian Gold Exchange and the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the connection between Shenzhen and Hong Kong, which is now going to allow countries that want to have deliverable gold be able to take it out of China. That was one of the biggest things that kept that gold trade from really taking off, is because in China, you can buy gold, but you can't take it out of the country. Now that Shenzhen market and Hong Kong are connected, you can buy these yuan-denominated futures in the gold market, and you can have the gold delivered to Hong Kong, which is a neutral point where you can then have it taken out to the world. So the East is already prepared for this. The West is not.
Correct. The planning stages that we've reported on, Ken, and detailed for several years now, have gone into fundamental, foundational systems in place that are functioning. I mean, it's reaching critical mass in reality systems that work. I don't know. It frustrates me in the West that people aren't seeing this.
Oh, by the way, somebody had mentioned that the U.S. really isn't noticing what China's going on. If you take a look at that national security assessment that was published, I think somebody mentioned, I don't know if Trump published it or if the intelligence services published it, but the one thing that they came out and said in that was that they are considering China and Russia economic aggressors because they refuse to play in the international standard of a unipolar world. That's as close to saying that China and Russia are trying to destroy the dollar-based system as they're going to get. I think a lot of people didn't pick that up. The U.S. knows it, and this is one of the reasons why they're trying to attack the South China Sea Islands, North Korea. They're trying to keep war going, is because they don't have an answer. China and Russia and the BRICS coalitions are doing. They don't have an answer for it. So instead, they have to obfuscate and try to delay it as much as possible. Yeah, I almost put it the equivalent of what Venezuela is doing with their new petro. Okay. If anybody else but Maduro had created this, then I my head would come up and say yes. But Maduro is somebody who is a bus driver. He's an ignorant lout who lives in a socialist, utopian, Marxist, lifestyle. So with that being said, there's only one real purpose why he's trying to create this scheme. And it's because, one, since they defaulted on loans with the U.S., nobody's lending them money. Two, they're running out of hard currency. If he runs out of hard currency, the military is not going to stand with him. They're going to turn on him in a New York minute the same way that the military coup took over Mugabe. Thirdly, they have the resources to back this. But is this really a political ploy to try to save his bacon, or does he really care about the people? Because obviously he hasn't given a crap about the people from day one. So, you're taking a look at all these different changes. Take a look at another place that has now decided not only that you can become a virtual citizen of that country, but it's going to go have a sovereign cryptocurrency. It's going to welcome every ICO in the world. It's going to welcome everything of the digital age. And that's Estonia.
Mm-hmm.
Estonia, I'm going to believe, because the Eastern Europe has already started building itself up to be the Eastern European version of Silicon Valley. They don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of productivity, but what they can do is they can be a hub for the blockchain, cryptocurrency, and the new global monetary system. So I'm going to take Estonia and I'm going to run with that, and I'm going to look at Venezuela and go, well, if you get rid of your leader, then maybe I'll give you the time of day. But taking that into more things of 2008, we are going to see. I think what we're going to see is we're going to start to see the death of some, probably a lot, of the unbacked cryptocurrencies.
Yeah,
I do not see in the long run Bitcoin lasting anything. Bitcoin Cash maybe, but Litecoin is a much better medium of exchange. Things like Ethereum and Ripple. By the way, CJ, I heard the interview, the morning interview show you had yesterday, and you were like touting Ethereum, and then just this morning Ripple passed it in market cap. So
yeah,
I thought that was
Ripple's like the banksters.
Exactly. We're going to start seeing markets that are going to be outside the regulators in a lot of these countries like Estonia. And they're going to be central hubs for the trading of cryptocurrencies, especially as more countries start bringing in regulation for this. The end result, I believe, people in this frequency shift are screaming for a return of sound money. Cryptocurrencies show them that they don't have to have a sovereign controlled thing, but still it's unbacked. It's just not getting the capacity to become a medium of exchange.
yes.
But what it's done is the ones that are going to be resource backed with gold, oil, real estate, something like that, these are going to stand the test of time. I think 2018 is going to see still a wild scramble in the wild west of unbacked cryptocurrencies. But when we get to 2019 and 2020, okay, that's where the new monetary system, the new banking system. Think about this. We've got what are called neobanks sprouting up all over the place. The banking system we have today is going to go by the wayside. Mm-hmm. There are already alternatives. Yes. It's going to go 100% over the next 2 or 3 years. And, back in the day, there were 2 banking systems, okay? Just before the Federal Reserve came about, there were the New York banks, and they dealt solely with governments and corporations. If you were starting a small business, where did you go to borrow money? Where did you go? You went to the pawn shops.
Oh, yeah.
Pawn shops was the banking of the little people up until the 1950s. Okay, that's going to return, only it's going to be in things like SALT, the cryptocurrency lending facility. Mm-hmm. It's going to be things like Gold Mint, not gold money, but Gold Mint. Gold Mint is already setting up a gold-backed cryptocurrency, and they're also setting up with pawn shops all around Eastern Europe, and they haven't gotten into Western Europe, but they're going to use that thing where gold-backed cryptocurrency is going to be the collateral for the lending through pawn shops to bring back that type of lending for small businesses and individuals. It's going to be a separation of the banking system. There's going to be the sovereign banking system that's going to use Fed coin and settlement coin. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all of them want to create their own cryptocurrencies for interbank settlement. That's fine. Screw them. They're not lending money outside of mortgages and auto loans and student loans anyway. But for people who want to do small businesses It's going to be the cryptocurrency sphere. It's going to be resource backed, and that's going to be really the commerce. You're almost going to see a differentiation between what countries trade amongst each other, and then the regular commerce using almost like a cryptocurrency barter type system. How that's going to work for big box stores and retail? Great question, because it's going to cost a lot of money to change your point of sale systems until the blockchain becomes interlinked with every other blockchain platform out there. Once that happens, then the new paradigm is here.
Yep.
Yeah. Great points, Ken. I also want to welcome W to the show. W, welcome. We have been discussing 2017, just kind of the highlights, and then obviously forecasting 2018. Guys, I'm fine on time today. I'm not sure if you guys have anything to rush off to, but I'm fine if we go past the hour, because I just think this conversation is just that important with it to go longer. I'm down if you guys are.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay,
Yeah, well, W needs to do his say, so let him run for a while.
Yeah. So we'll turn it over to you, W. So welcome, W.
Keep on going. Let me come up to speed with you guys. I apologize for having to come in a little bit late.
Ken, this is Wolf, and in the background, while you're telling that story about the banks getting flipped around and all the problems they'll go through, there needs to be something in the background, a music of some type playing with the dollar and a death march. I get back to the dollar because the disruption to it, particularly to Western holders, and some people are saying, well, that's all there is anyway. No, it's the world's reserve currency, where the East is getting rid of it as fast as they can. But the U.S. is going to, in particular, people who do not get away from paper assets, who are relying too much on the system. And I'll probably get to it later if CJ has a closing remarks segment, but there's a conversation I had with a gent regarding the system and tinfoil hat wearers, and Americans are just too reliant on the system.
Well, they are, and I'll give you the greatest example in the world. Okay, how many people did you know in your generation, and maybe your parents' generation, our parents' generation, when direct deposit first came along? How many people still demanded their paycheck printed for them every single week? They couldn't trust direct deposit. It took 2 decades before direct deposit became a mass and status quo. If you can't even do that, then the vast majority of people always are going to come late to the game. This is why China is moving. The vast majority of people in China want to get rid of cash, and the majority of their transactions are instant pay. Okay, the East, the new innovation begets people moving into the paradigm. As one of my favorite axioms is to go, the learners will inherit the earth, and the learned will find themselves fully functional in a world that no longer exists. Yeah. And so the baby boomers are going to live in their gated communities, and they're going to cry and moan, and they're not going to move. The millennials are already moving into this. The ones that are stuck are the Gen Xers. So.
Yep. I was just going to say that, Ken, to mention the millennials. The people who run the world, they already have their sights set on the next generation, Gen X's and millennials. Us old farts are, we're on the way out, but the millennials and all the teenagers, they're all raised in this virtual reality digital world, and they're already ready to accept what is coming. And I wanted to mention something you were talking about, the pawn shops. Walmart is already developing their own cryptocurrency, and I would expect that Amazon will too. And I've been noticing with my own, I have a Walmart store credit card, and I don't know if any of you have one of those, but they allow you to borrow cash on your Walmart credit line when you're buying your groceries. You can get cash back and just charge it to the Walmart credit card. So they're already in the business of lending money that way. So, and I've noticed in the last month, right around the Christmas season, they started pushing that service even more. They want you to borrow cash at the store checkout register, a checkout register, which, by the way, eliminated the cashier, because almost every register now at Walmart is a self-automated register where you check yourself out. You scan your own items, and you're borrowing money through their system. And so the whole Walmart credit card system is being prepped right now for Walmart's next level up, which is their own, some kind of Walmart coin, some sort of cryptocurrency.
I think we're ready for you.
Well, you're all of those things. I could have said stuff 30 times on things that were mentioned, including on the Amazon stuff. I actually know one of the names of the coins because I made it for them. But I'll have to hold on that for the time being. I was thinking of George Bush Sr. Remember when he went to a grocery store and they had to explain to him how the scanner worked on the groceries? He didn't even know how that process worked to scan the groceries because he didn't understand the tellers weren't punching it in by hand on the pricing. And because he didn't shop for stuff other people shop for. Where he was president, he doesn't even know how a scanner works. And that was shocking to people. A lot of people aren't bothered by the details of how these things work. They don't go shop at Walmart, for example. I personally haven't been in a Walmart probably in, I don't know, maybe a year. So, I was thinking of what Deb was explaining, and I was like, gosh, if I went to Walmart, I wouldn't know how to do the process. The other side of the coin is it would only take me a trip or two, and I would be up to speed. So a lot of these things you learn pretty quickly, and if you're forced to, the other thing that was coming to mind as you were talking, I had a client, and they didn't have a process to cut a check. It had to be a direct deposit on some stuff that I was doing here just recently. I've never done that with clients in this particular type of a setting. And so, and it was the name of one of the companies you just mentioned a second ago. So that was pretty surprising also. But people do adapt. Old farts like me will adapt fairly quickly if they're forced to make these changes, and they will find ways that make that happen relatively quickly. So are we decades away or a decade away from cryptos being able to be made fairly mainstream? I don't think we're that far. I think we may be further than a lot of the crypto people would like to think, but a lot closer than some of these other things. The one thing I will mention, SALT will change a lot of that and change it very quickly. If I was looking at any of the crypto angles as an investor, I would be looking immediately this week, not later this year, on SALT, because I think that's going to be one of the best ways to enter, as opposed to buying Bitcoin or Light or something like that for quite a while. I think they're going to become the exchange medium of choice because of their platform, the way that they're set up. If I was going to try and enter the cryptos somewhere and have a bet that allowed me to, kind of bet the field, that is like playing roulette on an even money bet, as opposed to trying to hit the exact right number straight up. looking at where we're at in the world right now, the one thing that I think is also amazing and is going to change things so radically this year. Have you guys been paying attention to the numbers of CEOs and senior level management that have been retiring over the last several months, but especially the last month or so? It is absolutely mind-boggling. All the big companies are going through this change of senior management that I don't think has ever occurred in my lifetime before in these kinds of numbers. You go down the list and it is absolutely, it's stunning. And the reason that that's going to change things, but not immediately, the new people will come in. There will be, they'll, for the most part, allow whatever system is taking place to continue. But they will then, within a period of months, begin to institute their personality. And that's disruptive. It takes time to reorient, and then it's something new. And no doubt that's going to be, in most cases, a younger group. So instituting new ideas, new methodologies, new focuses, it's going to be stunning. And I will say this, that is going to favor Trump. The people that are leaving are people that have been under this previous paradigm for at least the last administration in almost all of the cases. And a lot of the reason for this change is that their systems were keyed to a political orientation that doesn't hold power right now. So as that those new CEOs come online, get on deck, get their sea legs, what they're going to do, the way they're going to function is going to favor Trump, and I think fairly radically. They're going to drag their people, whether it even be kicking and screaming, into the new paradigm that they have in mind.
Very interesting, and I'm glad you went that direction, because I was, a lot of this is, I feel guilty because I feel like I should take questions from the audience. So this is more geared directly from me, because we're seeing all this with the arrests, and George Soros right now is in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. All these arrests and everything is occurring, but to date we have not seen any of the arrest. We have not seen, what would be the reason to hide that information, other than my concern, or what I feel is that it potentially is a massive distraction to keep us to coming to the realization, keeping the majority of America from waking up to the reality that the world is changing and leaving the dollar behind. And all this information that's put out there is just one big, massive distraction. I mean, what truly has been accomplished as far as the arrest, as far as the changes? I just want to open it up. So, Debbie, if you want to answer, or anyone else regarding
Let me just say this
regarding that.
There's no question in my mind that intelligently, wisely, a lot of this stuff has not been allowed to be in the public conversation thus far. But those ski boots and foot injuries that are masking probably tracking devices on a number of political parties, and probably other parties that we're not aware of, is very telling. Something's up there. And they're succumbing to that. They're allowing themselves to go that route because they Let's just do a hypothetical for a second. A very senior politician that everybody would know the name of suddenly has a foot injury and is walking around with some kind of a boot on, and they don't protest that somebody drugged me in or forced me to have an ankle bracelet on or whatever. They say nothing. They go along with the ruse that they had a little owie. Why aren't they making a big stink? Because they know that whatever transpired, the goods have been got on them. And for them to go public and protest that they've been subjected to some demeaning process or falsely charged or whatever, no. They know that whatever got is take them out type of stuff, and they're trying to work a deal. So the silence is very telling on the part of the people who may in fact have been subjected to some kind of a legal process. They are trying to cut a deal to stay alive or survive, and at the very least they're being allowed to continue on with their paradigm a little longer, get a paycheck, enjoy life the way it is with a little less disruption. Every day counts type of a thing. And so even the conversation we had a year ago, where I said you were going to see a lot of these key people taken out, whether it be by acts of God or death, or they just leave the scene. That's exactly what I was talking about. This absolutely stunning clearing the table of all of these senior people who were part of this previous paradigm. That's exactly what's occurring. Now, they go by a different calendar than we do. Their calendar is April 1st to April 1st. So we still have a few months as this process, I think, stays at a very high rate. We're not done yet. And it won't be over in just, a year. This process is going to continue for the next several years of this turnover. I think it actually still is going to gain momentum because it isn't just the senior people. The senior people may be resigning and stepping down, but as these new people come in, they'll bring in their own board. They'll bring in their own senior management. So we're seeing the first cresting wave of a series of waves that are going to be incredibly initially disruptive, but ultimately paradigm changing. It is going to be amazing. And there is a particular thing that I think that I've been reviewing with other folks for the last several months. There's one particular thing that I think is going to change the political climate so radically that it's going to literally just shut down this previous paradigm that the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bushes have enjoyed, where the media and the public just cowered and went along with whatever they were told. That is changing at the street level, and the people who don't want to go along with that are just getting swept off to the side. That previous paradigm has run its course, and John Q. Public, that is going to own the day moving forward, is going to demand and have an attitude of demanding, I don't believe you. I'm not listening to you unless what you say makes sense. There's been this acceptance of nonsensical stuff because people didn't want to disrupt the boat. As people become aware that they have been punked by a transgender supposedly being a woman as the First Lady, punked by the intelligence agencies concocting and putting together a person out of whole cloth, whole life, whole career that ultimately becomes president. Concocting out of whole cloth things about persons placed in power who are not by heritage who you thought they were. They're tied to other bloodlines. A lot of these things will upset the public so much that they will become all show me state type people. It's going to change the way that people take in information and what they will believe or accept of what's said to them, because just like with the potential arrests of prominent public figures, people will be stunned so much that they believed in certain people and what they had to say, they'll have a hard time believing anybody after it. I'm thinking of a very specific politician, male, not female, who had a supporter. And I dealt with that supporter back during a previous era, several decades ago. And they had mortgaged their house. They had put all this faith into this person and supported their campaign and thrown money at them. And then when the revelations came of some dirty dealing and that they were tied to a 3-letter agency with some of their activities that were un-American, this person was so stunned, it stopped them in their tracks, who had really believed. But when they finally had time to process that information, come back around and re-engage, the only thing I can equate it to is people that have stopped smoking. If you have someone who smoked for decades or all their adult life, and then they suddenly quit, and you come back to them a year or two later, well, somebody like me who never smoked, I'll tolerate the cigarette smoke again in a situation as much. They can't be around that smoke, and they won't cut the person who is still smoking a lot of slack if they think they're discourteous. They'll say something because they used to be that, and they just do not have the patience for people that won't take it outside. Get it away from me. I don't want to smell smoke. They're so keyed. They're so sensitive, they get it instantly. The flip that's going to happen as a lot of these exposures take place, those people that were totally taken in, process mentally how much they were taken in, and then do the turnaround. When they come back to engaging, they are going to be just livid and not easily move along, take a breath, relax, just get along, go along. They will not be in that mode. They're going to be pissed. So I don't know if that clicks for a lot of you guys, but I think there's an attitude change that I'm trying to describe here.
Ken, Bankster Wolf, any follow up or any questions or anything that you for W?
I think it'd be worse than what W is saying. and for a simple reason.
Understating. I think you're right. I think it's going to be.
But there's a reason I think it's even bigger. Mm-hmm. And this is something discussed with some of what I like to call my quote unquote wolf pack. But what will trigger people getting it? I say it will be the economic downfall, and they start asking questions because it affects them personally. It gets inside their head and away from their iPhone, and they notice it personally. And so they start looking at it and go, wait a second, you mean my nephew who died of a heroin overdose, this was due to these government bozos making a profit to support this paper Ponzi scheme through stuff coming from Afghanistan that I thought was for a noble cause. And this happened on my watch?
Let me just add this one thing. Not just Afghanistan, but look at this whole Hezbollah protective situation. Now, behind the scenes, I've been on that since the Saudi assassination attempt on U.S. soil. When I dealt with a specific company and their protective systems because of that threat before it was public. And literally everybody flew it on their jets, reviewed the paperwork, and it was a very expensive meeting. And that was before anybody in the country at the street level knew that there was this threat that had just occurred. And so part of the problem was that this last administration, when DEA and FBI, IRS personnel had the goods on these senior drug moving and money laundering people related to Hezbollah, the administration stopped them cold and didn't allow arrests to take place. The investigations were developed enough that these people wanted to go and have these people arrested. They had done the presentations to grand juries. They had charges in hand and were legally, lawfully able to go arrest these very senior drug moving and money laundering people, most of them on U.S. soil, because they were engaged at the instant in criminal activity that they could be arrested on. And this last administration stopped them cold. So it's not just out of Afghanistan. Most of that was related to South America and supported Cuba. So as the public becomes more aware of that, and remember, Trump has allowed taking the gloves off of these groups to relook at that. Congress is relooking at that. There's going to be arrests, and there's going to be people aware of the politicians involved in stopping those investigations, not just from the Democrat side, but the Republican side. And I think that's a game changer too. And I think as people realize what was allowed to happen to make this nuclear deal with Iran occur and all the money that changed hands, they're going to be stunned. And so, as you started to say, Wolf, not just upset that there are people they know or who are in their family who lost limbs, who were killed, who used years of their life under some type of mandatory deployment to protect that drug dealing, money laundering crowd. I think that gets people's ire, and they are not going to be happy with it. At the same time, what I am concerned about, I had a conversation yesterday with a person whose name most everybody in this group would know instantly. And he kind of stunned me when we were talking about, what was coming this year. And he said, the thing that I'm most worried about is, are we going to have to go to war again? I just feel it in my bones, and we're about to lose a lot of people again. I don't expect it early in the year. I expect it later in the year, but there's another war coming. They'll have to do it to cover this up. I didn't expect it from this particular person, but he's got good street sense, and I think he's feeling something that a lot of other people that are in his clubs that run the same crowd are also feeling. They sense something coming. They may not know exactly what it is, but they feel it in their bones. And so at the same time that we're pissed off, like you said, with the drug dealing out of Afghanistan and the revelations there, or the drug dealing with Hezbollah in a very broad sense, including all the South America stuff and gun running, and they become aware of that through some of this stuff. At the same time, we're pissed about it. we're going to be getting embroiled in and involved in and have to do some very extensive military operations that is going to be upsetting. We're back in a war mode again. Really? We got 30 years of it and we're going to have to go back and do it again? It's going to piss people off.
Ken Bankster.
No, not much more to add on that. It's definitely a different viewpoint on things that I really haven't been looking too much into. Although the fact of the matter is people have to realize this: the deep swamp, the military, and then the intelligence industrial complexes, these go back to the 50s. You know, there was even an excerpt, I forgot who wrote it. Maybe it was QAnon, maybe it wasn't. But the whole Cold War thing was created as a means to bring about the military industrial complex and to go ahead and keep the control over the places like Europe and the geopolitical spots that were devastated after World War II. So the whole thing was concocted. It had nothing to do with Soviet aggression to take over the world. You know, when you really get down to it and take a look at the history of the Soviet Union, Stalin was paranoid, yes, but he was more interested in creating buffer states than to actually take over Europe and spread communism around the world. You can just tell it, look at Russo-Sino relations in the 60s and 70s to see that, you know, one man's communism is not the same as another man's communism. But with this being said, this swamp that we're seeing, it's going to take years, and it's going to be even beyond Trump's administration, whether he goes 4 or 8 years to deal with it, to solve it. And even then, if, you know, the frequency shift that we saw 100 years ago, it culminated in not necessarily an outcome that is beneficial. In Europe, of course, we had Mussolini, we had Hitler, we had Franco in Spain. We had a lot of these things that really shaped the course of the 20th century that weren't exactly outcomes that were beneficial to democracy and freedom, etc. So what may be coming out of this in certain areas of the world is going to be, you know, aspects of freedom, and in others we're going to tyranny, dictatorship, and probably, you know, at some point another global type war. So, you know, we have people today, because of the fact that the world is smaller, that communications and the internet have made things fast, and now we have this expectation that we can change things that have percolated for 70 years and get rid of them just by changing the administration. It's not going to happen. At least it's not going to happen that quickly. But I think absolutely right that things are going to accelerate, not necessarily in 2018, but probably 2019 and 2020. And many of those who are getting out right now, they're trying to protect themselves from what they recognize the jig is up. And if they remain in power and remain a target, then they're could find themselves, you know, bankrupt or put in prison. But those who try to escape now and move themselves to their islands and be content at 70, 80 years old to just get out of the thing, I think they're going to get by and they're going to escape. But the ideologues and the sociopaths who try to remain in power thinking that they can outlast what's happening, those are the ones who you're going to see, whether they're in Congress. I mean, think about this. There was an individual from the Democratic Party who publicly said it's time for Pelosi to retire, and it's time for, Howard Dean. Howard Dean said it's time for Pelosi to retire. It's time for new blood to come in here. And the next, the 2018 elections, I'm going to be supporting anybody who's not an establishment Democrat. So even then, you're calling for the rise of the new blood. Even in the Democratic Party, they realize that the old establishment is dead. And those that are going to hang on could potentially kill it for decades if they don't allow these new ideas and this new innovation that's going hand in hand, both political and technological. That, you know, if you don't bring that in at the same time, then you could have some of our long-standing establishments and traditions disappear in a moment's notice.
Right. Wolf
Back
Banks,
on
before W, go ahead. Follow up before I jump in. Go ahead.
Let me piggyback on that for a second. The one thing that is, you know, it goes back to a theme that I've been on for quite a while, but I think it bears saying right here. If you look at this establishment group that is under attack this exact second, those players, ultimately they're tied to this Rockefeller family's hidden hand in American politics that's been there going back to at least the 50s in this current paradigm. Not that they weren't there prior to that, but especially from the 50s on, with Nelson Rockefeller, some of the other brothers, David's hand in the background, that picked winners, picked the people that were at the forefront of the politics. You know, when Nixon was out, when he lost the Kennedy election, where did he go work? He worked at a law firm a few doors down in the same building, just a different street address, from where David Rockefeller's offices were. And when he came back into politics, he had this paranoid thing, and he's always looking over his shoulder. And people, you know, believed at the time behind the scenes that Nelson Rockefeller, when Watergate happened and Hillary was in there and all that stuff, that part of the plan was to backdoor Nelson Rockefeller into the presidency, or at least the vice presidency, because he couldn't win by election. Behind the scenes, the family was picking the winners who moved into senior management in the intelligence agencies, who got on which committees inside Congress, etc. And so in the background, there's been this hidden hand working that has been affecting U.S. politics to an extreme behind the scenes. Now that David Rockefeller is not there anymore, now that a lot of the key players, the Clintons, the Bushes, who are tied to that strong family, are stepping aside or being taken out, is going to change the politics in this country. And it would be my contention that most of these very high level politicians or groups that are being cleared off the table are related specifically to that family. Now, they won't go down easily, but they're going down. And in that vacuum, will it just be whatever's available that fills the voids? No. I contend that what's happening in this broader sense is it's like a merger, two corporations coming together and a new group taking over. The Rothschild affiliated groups are backfilling all of those positions. And so what you're really seeing is like two big corporations, in this case families, where one is becoming the dominant one. So in a merger that was a very famous merger I dealt with years ago, it came down to they had to pick which name they were going with. Two very powerful companies, similar overall values, and one group won and the other one, all of their senior people got taken out. Their management paradigm went away, and the name stayed with that first group that won, and they owned the future of that very large eventual corporation. What we're seeing is a change of who's in power. And as I have been saying for a very long time, prior to even Trump coming in the picture, the groups that were back him were Rothschild related. So there is a group that's winning and a group that's out. And so a lot of what we're seeing, whether it be at the corporate level or at the politic level or the agencies behind the scenes who are controlling our society and controlling much of the planet in this military, political, industrial complex, those that were influenced heavily by the Rockefeller paradigm are the table is being cleared of them. They won't go easily, and in a lot of places you won't recognize it, but that is the group that's being targeted. And it's these Rothschild affiliated groups and individuals that are going to survive the day and are surviving this exact second, and at a different level. That's what this is all about.
Quick question for the group, and it's probably more of just a philosophical question in regards to the demise of the dollar. And we already know that our urban areas that are so challenged in understanding what that potentially could bring, whether it's hyperinflation, all those things that occur. And W alluded to that the deep state, the cabal, will do everything that they can to preserve waging war at the cost of the loss of life, the destruction to humanity. Is it wrong to not want that? Is it not wrong? Is it wrong to not want to preserve the dollar, to fight everything that we can to preserve that? I'm not forming my opinion or saying yes or no, but I think it needs to be open for discussion to say, to understand what that's going to be like.
Let me just bear with me for 30 seconds longer on what I just said and on that comment. Who's been running the U.S. side of the world's dollar matrix? That was all Rockefeller stuff. Who ran Saudi Arabia and made Saudi Arabia what it is in the world energy situation? The Saudi-backed dollar, Saudi oil-backed dollar. We run an oil-backed currency. Standard Oil is who pulled the strings to see to it that the Saudi royal family became dominant in Saudi Arabia, in that country that has become the backbone of our dollar. That's a Rockefeller operation. That is getting cleared out. It's getting reorganized. And so you can't talk about the dollar without going back to the Rockefeller Standard Oil paradigm. And that's what's changing this exact second. And these new currencies are related in part to this wipeout of the dollar and wipeout of that family paradigm that has been so dominant on the U.S. scene and on the international scene. So Trump cannot go after them without going after, in fundamental ways, the way our dollar has been protected and has been sifted into the world scene. It's going to have changes that, to most observers, they won't see as connected, but that really ultimately are connected. And so the dollar, Rockefeller, intelligence agencies paradigm, most of the players that got senior positions at CIA and other operations were somehow tied to that Rockefeller schism. And that's what's under attack. That's what's being taken off the table and backfilled with other players. And that will include currencies and the way that those currencies control throughout the world.
I would like to add something to your question, CJ, since you mentioned, yes, it is a philosophical, even a religious question, because the creation of money activity. The dollar is a religious object, as is every other type of piece of money that exists on the planet. A monetary system was imposed on people. People are allowed to grow whatever food they want, create whatever they want, but there was one thing that individuals were never endowed with the ability to create, and that's money. power of money creation that was always in the hands of a priesthood that was set up over us. And around 2,500 years ago, that priesthood was passing through a revolutionary time where the idea of state minted coined money was imposed during the time of the Persian and Greek Empire. That was a radical shift at that time. People went from just weighing out pieces of gold and silver to finish a transaction to an idea that a state authority to print money, stamp it with the face of the king and the face of a god, and that was the new matrix that was imposed on those people. We're going through another shift now, like that shift that happened 2,500 years ago. System of state minted money, fiat money, is coming to an end, but that same priesthood that created the first system is now creating the next system. As we are all being merged into this digital age where both our money is digital, our reality is digital, and the next phase is to move human beings into becoming something digital.
Wow. Yeah. All right, let's go around the horn real quick. And Bankster, what else? Closing comments, please.
Yeah, I'll just mention the things I'm working on. I've been promising to write a little summary of a book that Joseph Farrell wrote called The Grid of the Gods, because it all ties in to reason I feel that artificial intelligence and quantum computing are being created is because of what this priesthood is really after: the ultimate physical power over forces of the earth and forces within our galaxy and even the natural forces around the sun. And these are conversations W and I have had, and we'll be getting into that more this year. But that is because people always ask that. All wants. They've got all the power over people. They have the power of money creation. What else is left? And that's what we're getting to. I think either it was Ken or Wolf mentioned this power of godship is what they need to do. Now, it includes the power of being able to create something new, which is kind of rolling out with this whole artificial intelligence thing. But the power of godship also implies that you have the power over supernatural, supergalactic forces, and they are acquiring that even as we speak.
Wolf.
I hate to be one track, redundantly boring, and keep harping on the top.
No, it's healthy. It's healthy, Wolf. Go, please.
And harping on the dollar. W mentioned, old farts adapting to system changes via transactions. Yeah, that's no problem. They ain't gonna adapt too good to their dollar and their system failing. That's something nobody's gonna adapt to unless they start trying to prepare. And reminds me of a situation that I was facing in a conversation with a gent back last summer. And I was getting timber off his property. He's my age, basically retired, and he's talking about what did I used to do because I wasn't really working. It was a normal work week day, and I wasn't working except at his property getting timber. And he said, what do you do? I said, well, I used to be in the financial business, insurance-related stuff, those sorts of things. He said, I don't trust the stock market. I don't trust what's going on. It just doesn't make sense anymore. What should I do? I think I've told this story, but it still bears repeating because it hovers around a living, breathing entity, and that's our system, and it is controlled by the dollar. And that system is going to blow up. This guy says, what should I do? And I said, well, I sleep pretty good at night. I'm not worried about much of that because I tried to get out of the system as the best I could. And that involves getting hard assets, getting away from the paper counterparty risk world. He says, I don't know how you do that. He says, that's tinfoil hat stuff. I turned it around to him and I said, I don't mean to insult you. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat. You are. He says, how do you figure? I said, you worship the system. You're afraid to get out of it because you think you'll look funny. People will look at you strange. Yeah, well, they may look at you strange, but it's because you're living good and they're poor when this stuff breaks down. You've got, folks, I'm speaking to Americans in particular, you've got to get out of the system. They have you corralled. It's that easy to see if you stand back and look at it. And as the wizards, as I call them, which are W and V and Ken and Jim Willie and all these guys stated a while back, when you start hearing of oil trade from the big boys, particularly the Saudis, and something different than the dollar, without major assassinations of everybody involved, something's about to happen. That's happened. China's involved. And the old guy I was talking to back last summer, he best get himself out of that paper system. Again, it's redundant, but I got to stay on the same subject. The dollar is under attack and it will be defeated. How is defeated? Total defeat, elimination, or a disruption and a lack of purchasing power is irrelevant when you're over indebted. It will hit you in the crotch no matter what. People, please pay attention to that. Nothing more to say.
I'm going to stick my opinion in the middle because I don't want to go last. and I can do that since I'm moderating, but so here's my opinion real quick, and it's not very popular, and I completely get it. But here's how I feel about things is that I don't think there is a political solution to America in regards to the federal government. I truly feel that I would be fine with evoking martial law, releasing the federal powers, returning powers back to the states, allow people to vote with their footprints. And at the end of the day, let's admit it, we're a very divided country, based upon beliefs, based upon, so many factors to it. So allow people to vote with their footprints. And at the end of the day, if we need to decide that it's time that the United States needs to partition off, divide, then let's do that. I'm not going to force my opinion on someone else to get them to say that I'm more right than you're wrong or vice versa. But I don't think there's a political solution to America. I just truly don't. I have given up on that. So that's just my belief at this point. Not to be too negative. Ken.
Well, I'm going to end with a forecast prediction. My background, of course, is history. I dabble in economics, and people seem to enjoy it, so that's okay. But history and trends are something that I've really spent a lot of time looking at. And one of the things when you take it, I'm going to lay out real quick foundation, then I'm going to give what I really see happening probably near the end of 2018, but definitely going into 2019, 2020. We've got the sexual harassment scandals that are going across. We have the rise of the political correctness, feminism that even was beyond what occurred with the women's marches and things like that. We see the trends are going on in Japan, where the birth rate is now suddenly down to 1.3, 1.2. Japan could disappear within a generation or two. The Japanese culture. We have in Europe where a lot of that is being marriages are falling by the wayside. In Britain, more than 60 to 70% of all childbirths are out of wedlock. We see this in the United States where the rise of different movements like MGTOW, men going their own way, with the sudden boom and acceleration in AI. What's going on in Japan with robotics. I know this is esoteric and out of the thing, but really it has extreme repercussions for the global community and for mankind going forward. But I think we're going to see in 2018 the first. Each model is going to get better. Is fembots or sexual robots that are going to pretty much take this frequency shift we have where marriage, child birth, all these things are getting pushed aside because relationships no longer are anything like we used to have. and the pendulum is going to shift where you know, the feminist movement that wants superiority and to pretty much destroy any type of manhood or you know, men's side, that's going to shift, and men are just going to completely eradicate. You're going to see large swaths of every culture and population that's going to disdain human contact in families and go towards this AI and this robotic intimacy to replace, because they just don't want to deal with it. It's an economic problem when it comes to divorce, the cost of raising children, and the fear of anything being considered sexual harassment. And then, of course, on the other side, there's no nurturing. There's no, because of the cost of everything. It's an economic, it's a societal, it's a paradigm shift. And when you add in technology of what's happening, I think that's going to be a huge sea change in late 2018, 2019, 2020, that's going to have repercussions going into the future for the next several generations.
W.
Yeah, that's all stuff that I would absolutely agree with. I think that it's still an early wave, but it's gaining momentum very quickly, even though it's been talked about for over a decade or more. This is that moment where that time is changing. Couple diverse thoughts. First of all, in Rome, the temple that was also the treasury was the temple of Saturn. And ultimately, these players on all of the key families are Saturnists. David Icke has talked extensively about that, and I concur with what he has concluded about all of the imagery of Saturnists in the background in our culture. And the reason that I raise that is that this is not about we're winning and these bad guys are out. This is about at the global level. A century ago, there was about 120 families that were really controlling the world, if you will. Technology and intermarriage and consolidation of boards and boardroom people reduced that down to, at the beginning of the Reagan administration, there was about a dozen families that were really running the world behind the scenes to a great extent, you know, in the 50% range, let's say. That has continued to consolidate to where now it's down to these two primary families. Doesn't mean that nobody else is doing it or that every person is related. It just means there's been this hidden hand activity behind the scenes. What you're watching is a further consolidation where it really was down to Rothschild, Rockefeller, and the entities that had picked their team, and now it's down to one. And it's even what Trump has done with the Jerusalem issue. By saying we're moving to Jerusalem, he is forcing everyone to pick a side, and either you're with us or you're not. And those people that pick the wrong side will just be out of the game. And so you have to pick a side. And so at the corporate level and at the political level and at the money level, these are Saturnists. If you're going to pick a team, you got to pick the team that's a winner based on where this whole paradigm is going. But ultimately, whatever ruler ran Rome still had to kiss up behind the scenes to the high priests of the Saturnist cabal behind the scenes. You know, you don't think those people are influential right now? Christmas is based on a Roman holiday worshiping Saturn. And the time of year at that midwinter thing, we still celebrate that across the West. And you don't even realize that your entire Christmas paradigm is built on a Roman holiday of sun worshipers worshiping Saturn. And that bothers a lot of people. A lot of people just want to tune that out. They don't want to think about that. They don't want to be bothered with those details. That's not the way I feel about it. It doesn't matter how you feel. They're getting their magic done their way, and you're participating, and you're not fighting it. They're going to win in what's going on in this current consolidation. And if you believe you're winning and the good guys are winning, that works for them. Fine, whatever you want to think. The reality is this Trump revolution is about a consolidation of power. Is Washington, D.C. going to become less powerful or more powerful? While a lot of people would like to believe that this means that we're taking over the swamp, we're winning, the reality is that you're with this evil opposition being wiped out in Washington, D.C., there's going to be a consolidation of power that's going to make Washington, D.C. even more powerful in U.S. activities and in world activities. And even the fight for that on a global level is going to be off the charts. This is a revolution, and it won't be bloodless.
All right, Rogue Money fans, there you have it. Thank you so much for listening in, and want to thank W, Bankster, Wolf, Ken. I wish V could have made it, and then also James, the Russian analyst. Very thankful to be working with such a talented group, and I truly mean that. And so I appreciate our fans, our listeners, and we will see you in 2018. We are over and out. Take care, everyone, and be safe.